Hi, Sparkles, and welcome back to Intuitive Wisdom. This is episode 223, and today I'm joined by someone whose work beautifully bridges ancient insight with modern understanding. Professor E.A. Burlingame, award-winning anthropologist, author, and educator. In this conversation, E.A. gives us a clear, accessible overview of the four branches of anthropology: archaeology, linguistics, cultural, and biological or physical. And she shows us how this field is essentially the story of human existence. But what really makes this episode special is how she translates that knowledge into personal development wisdom we can use in our everyday lives. We explore powerful lessons about tolerance, group dynamics, resilience, and how anthropology helps preserve ancient wisdom in a world that often forgets its roots. E.A. shares the purpose behind her book, A Taste of Anthropology, and how understanding the past gives us context for conflict, connection, and the things we feel even when we can't see them. One of the core truths she offers is this: humans are all the same and all different at the exact same time. I'm going to repeat that because I've been mulling that over and it's really profound. Humans are all the same and all different at the exact same time. And learning to hold both of those realities opens the door to a broader, more compassionate perspective. Her work is deeply empowering, unexpectedly uplifting, and profoundly grounding. If you're craving a bigger lens on humanity, or if you've been feeling the heaviness of the world, this episode will lighten your heart and expand your understanding. Here we go. Welcome to Intuitive Wisdom, a space where insight meets energy and intuition leads the way. I'm K. Margaret Solorio, author, Angel Reiki Master, biotech graduate, and a guide for those seeking alignment in their home and life. Whether you're navigating change, clearing emotional clutter, or simply craving clarity, Intuitive Wisdom invites you to slow down, tune in, and rise into your authentic self. New episodes weekly. Come home to your own knowing. All right, Sparkles, quick announcements before we get to the awesome interview with E.A. Have you taken my free quiz yet? It's called Is Your Home Supporting Your Expansion? It only takes a few minutes and you get some clear insight into how your space may be shaping your energy and where you can start to shift things. Go to deliciousease.com/quiz. And if your space feels heavy or stuck or just a little off, or you've just gone through a big life change, life transition, got into a new home, my home frequency reset is a remote, intuitive, energetic refresh designed to bring your home back into harmony with you. Perfect if you're craving a fresh start or deeper alignment with your vision. You can also find details at deliciousease.com/services. And my book, Make Ease Your Vibe, is available on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle versions. It's packed with practical strategies for shifting your mindset, managing your energy, and different time strategies so that you can make easier vibe, right? Raise that daily frequency. Plus, you get access to exclusive chapter bonuses on the website. Click on book, go to deliciousease.com, click on book, and then you can enter in your information and get access to those. And I'm working on my next book, which I'm planning to publish next year, so stay tuned. Also, I'm on Insight Timer, a teacher on Insight Timer now. So if you're looking for quick guided meditations, I've got some awesome ones there and I add to it regularly. Be sure to check them out. Most of them are free to access using the app. Again, Insight Timer. And last but not least, we've opened up listener support. If you would like to help us continue to grow in the new year, I definitely, surely appreciate it. You can donate using the link in the show notes and you'll get a special shout out and blessing headed your way as thanks. All right, let's get to the interview with E.A. Welcome again, E.A. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's a very rainy and gloom day in New York City, but I love rainy and gloomy days, and it's the day before Halloween, so I'm very happy.
Yeah, it's a good time. Well, as you may know, on this podcast, we like to explore what it means to live in alignment with your energy and how trusting your intuitive wisdom can transform your inner and your outer world. So I was curious for you if you could share a time your intuition nudged you into doing something unexpected.
Yes. There are lots of them, but I think ultimately when I hear that question, the one that comes to mind immediately is the process that I went through to get into anthropology,
Oh.
because I truly believed when I was an undergrad and I was going into, my first semester freshman year, I was going to be pre-med. I was very much interested in becoming an OBGYN. I wanted to help people with, birth. That was my path. And the thing is that for a couple of years previous to going into college, I had been going into the same section of the library over and over and over again and reading what was in essence physical anthropology. I didn't know it as that term, but I was like reading all of these seminal physical anthropology books, and I just loved it. So first semester freshman year, I'm sitting there looking at all of the classes that I can possibly take, and shocker of shockers, one of them is physical anthropology, and I was like, taking that class. And as soon as we had our first lecture in that class, and there was an explanation as to what anthropology was, I knew that I had found what I had always wanted to do. I just didn't know what it was. I didn't have a name for it. I'm almost positive I heard the term anthropology before, but I'm not sure that I knew exactly what it meant. And when I was in that class, it kind of all coalesced together. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to be pre-med. I want to do this.
I had a similar, but I wasn't as brave to switch my majors experience. But taking an anthropology course in college and just being fascinated by it. For those who aren't as familiar with the term, could you tell us more, like give a quick overview of anthropology and where your work fits in that field?
Sure, absolutely. I actually have written an article called "Understanding Anthropology is Easy" on LinkedIn.
Oh, yay.
That's always a good place to go to. I've been telling people to go there, but really quickly, anthropology is basically what I will say in a nutshell, is the holistic study of humans. Anything and everything that human beings do is something that anthropologists either will be interested in studying or have studied or in the process of studying. Around the world, there's many different ways that people define what falls into the category of anthropology, but I'm an American. I was trained as an American anthropologist, so I very much look at it through an American lens. And in the US, it's a four-field profession or science. So it involves archaeology, linguistics, cultural anthropology, and physical anthropology. So in essence, the way that anthropologists look at humans is through their history, their language, their culture, and their biology. So it's very much this whole, the whole of the human existence is what anthropology is interested in studying. Of course, there are other fields that study humans too, obviously, but they tend to study humans through, one or two lenses. They kind of focus in on an aspect of humanity. Anthropology wants to study the whole of what it means to be human. And I sometimes have students who are very frustrated with that because they want, anthropology to be one thing, that's what they're expecting. And I laugh at that because that's actually what intrigued me and what attracted me to anthropology was that it was so very broad in, what you could do and what you could study and how you could look at human beings. But all I can say to that is basically that if human beings weren't so broad, then anthropology wouldn't have to be so broad.
I was just going to say, in the end, it's a bit of a compliment that we're not one-dimensional.
Exactly.
You have a term called anthropology wisdom that I want to hear more about. Can you clarify what it means? And I think my question kind of aimed at studying humans. I think what you were saying is like some of the other scientific fields like medicine study how to physically help the body heal. But then anthropology, how is that, besides us as humans understanding where we came from, how does that help us now?
Well, I think it's broad. Again,
Many ways.
Yeah. But ultimately, when I say, if I say like anthropology wisdoms, I'm usually talking about aspects of sort of personal development lessons that you can learn by studying anthropology. So for instance, by studying anthropology, you can learn to be tolerant. You can learn reflexive. You can learn how to handle, group dynamics. You can learn, there's resilience. I mean, there's so many aspects of, sort of wisdoms that you can learn from anthropology when it comes to sort of personal development and, a process of becoming more enlightened, if you will, which we talked about before we started recording. But I think also, it is very true that anthropology has wisdom that it has through the process of doing scientific research over the last 100 years or so, just sort of gathered information, wisdoms from different cultures, different time periods. So that's certainly an aspect of
kind of keeping that ancient wisdom alive.
Exactly. Which, again, I spent 10 plus years teaching college students, introduction to cultural anthropology or introduction to anthropology classes. And students would come in the classroom and they'd learn about, the Jutwanzi, for instance, who were, and sort of more or less kind of still are, sort of foraging peoples. They're hunter-gatherer peoples. And some of my students, not all of my students by any stretch of the imagination, but some of my students were dismissive of, a culture that is, their economic system is hunting and gathering, because in their minds, that's primitive, it's backwards. Oh. There's no wisdom there to be imparted to, people who are, living industrialized capitalist lives. And so, when you actually study anthropology, you find that in reality, there are lessons to be learned from people, especially people who are very different from yourself. That in learning to respect other cultures and the things that they can teach, you also in turn learn to have a more balanced and respectful attitude towards your own culture as well. So there's that's definitely an aspect of anthropology wisdoms. There's just, for me, and this is, I'm in love with anthropology, so I'm definitely biased. But for me, there are just so many things that are filled with knowledge and wisdom that you can learn by studying anthropology, by doing anthropology, if that's your bag, that, really, it's just broad. There's just so many things that can fall under the banner of anthropology wisdoms.
Yeah. And I love, since I often try to look at like energy through lines, it also feels like a connective, almost like giving that evidence to your ego that, oh yeah, we are all quite similar, seeing that energy flow through. But yeah, I think it is fun also to receive that perspective, because when you were just talking about hunter-gatherers, it made me think about how, like, we learn in school, all these civilizations rise and fall, and people have been hunter-gatherers for so many thousands of years. Like, that in itself should give it credence or credit for having lasted that long.
I used to joke in my classes, I would say, the old joke, what's the oldest profession? Prostitution. Wrong. The oldest profession is foraging. It's hunting and gathering. It's, basically been in existence since human beings have been in existence. And there are still people on this planet who that is their economic system. They're not being cute about it. That's literally what their economic system is. And, it stood the test of time. I'm not saying everybody needs to be a hunter-gatherer. Not everybody can be. I mean, you can't be a hunter-gatherer in the United States. It's illegal.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yes, indeed. But in other places in the world and just in general, to practice that as your economic system it's just as advanced as any other economic system that you could practice on this planet.
Wow. Well, I'm going to have to think about that for a while. Why don't you tell us about your book? You have a copy behind you, Taste of Anthropology, How the Wisdom of Anthropology Can Improve Your Life Skills and Help You Live Well in a Divided World.
Yes. It's a book that I actually wrote because of all the work that I've been doing in anthropology classes, again, over the last decade plus of my career. It was basically, it came from the fact that when I was teaching anthropology classes in colleges, I was mostly teaching anthropology to students who were never going to become anthropologists. They were primarily in my classes because they, as they would say, because I have to be, they would say,
oh no,
it's a distribution requirement. Some of them would say, well, it seemed to be the most interesting of the group that I had to choose from, so that's why I'm in your class. But ultimately, I had a lot of students in the class who, the anthropology didn't mean much of anything to them. And so I wanted to teach them anthropology in a way that whether they ever became anthropologists or not, they would be able to apply, learning, the wisdoms, going back to anthropology wisdoms, in their everyday lives. And what I was noticing is because I was teaching in that way, my students would come back to me and they would say, how you said that thing about reflexivity, I blah, 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 blah. And they were directly applying it into their lives.
Wow.
I had one student who told me that she was having a lot of trouble at her job and she didn't really know how to understand what was going on. But then we had done a section on gender power structures. And she went, oh, that's patriarchy. That's what's going on at my job. It's patriarchy. So she felt empowered. She felt like she knew what was going on and like she could actually deal with it. So the fact that my students were showing me that they could apply, the things that I was teaching in the class and it could help them better their lives and even in small ways was what inspired, this book. I wrote it during the pandemic, so it's primarily focused on conflict. And so, it's basically about showing through, by going from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 9, which is the final chapter, how you can learn aspects of anthropology to basically be able to deal with conflict and change and strife in your own world. Now, of course, there are other fields that also can teach you those things. I'm not suggesting that anthropology is the best one or the only one. It's not, but it's really good. And the way that I, have made the chapters, you basically go through each chapter to learn a lesson that you can apply to deal with conflict at the same time as you're learning anthropology. So you're learning about power structures, but at the same time you're learning about group dynamics. You're learning about, gender, sex, and sexuality, but you're also at the same time learning resilience. So this is how I've set up the chapters. And at the end of every single chapter, I have activities that are meant to reinforce the learning. The way I teach is very much learning by doing. I'm very much applied. In my mind, it is wonderful to learn things just to know them, just for the joy of learning. But I also think that it's very important for you to learn things so you can apply them in a positive way in your life. And so at the end of every single chapter, I have exercises that people can do that are, again, supposed to reinforce what they're learning in the chapter. And again, reinforcing those personal development skills that they can apply to areas of their life where there's conflict and change and difference. So that's the book. That's the book in a nutshell.
That sounds amazing. And we definitely all need a copy at this day and age. But also, I think now I understand from listening to you that anthropology and what you teach really gives context to what we can't see, but we all feel, those bigger topics and themes that affect us culturally and as humans, that it's, I think, a lot maybe isn't taught otherwise because you don't see it. And you don't realize it's affecting you because it's not, you can feel it, something's off, but to have the language to put to it or the context then in history of, oh, this is where that's coming from, that's fascinating and very helpful. I have those conversations with my children sometimes in terms of not, I'm going to now read your book and then maybe I will have those conversations, but in terms of not generational trauma, but these generational patterns. And if my kids get frustrated with me, I try to stop and say, okay, here's context. Here's what I experienced. Here's what I'm trying to do that's better. no doubt you will do better than me, but let's not get super angry at me because the intent was good. Like to give it that kind of cultural context because we're both growing. I grew up very differently than my children are growing up. Geography, location, culture, everything, time, in history. So yeah. Oh, that's fantastic and very helpful.
I try to make the activities as engaging as possible. So, there are things that one of the activities, it's in every single chapter, is I encourage people to go out on an adult play date. It reminded me of, your children. We know about children having play dates, but do adults ever plan play dates for themselves? Why not? Especially if it's going to allow them to reinforce, a lesson that hopefully they can apply in a positive way in the rest of their lives. So, yes, absolutely. And to, what you were saying about, sort of children becoming, upset with their parents, or parents, sort of realizing that they're going to make mistakes, but they're kind of upset about it. I had a private student a couple of years ago who was working through, her daughter had basically is transgender. And she initially, when, her daughter came to her and said, "This is, what I am, Mom," she had a very hard time with it. And she felt, like she said the wrong things. She made the wrong, decisions. Even when, her child was little, she was insisting that her child be something that her child was not. And so she was crying. She was saying to me, "I feel so bad." And I just basically said to her exactly what you said. Parents have to do the best that they can possibly do based on their understanding of what best is. And then children need to have compassion for their parents because they're going to probably do it slightly differently again in their version of what
hopefully
hopefully.
But I think that's what's really cool about your work as well, that opening the door then to seeing how other cultures do the same thing, because we are all human, then allows for that broader perspective and again that context for all that we do.
Indeed. And I think, one of the most fundamental sort of lessons from anthropology, and, it may seem sort of course, and obviously, Professor Burlingame, obviously, is this notion that is the reality that human beings are both the same. We're all the same, but at the same time, we're all different.
Very different experiences. Yes.
Exactly. So those two realities are happening at the same time with humanity. And again, we live, here in the United States, we live in a culture that pretty much wants everything to be, have one answer, either it's this or it's that. Like there's no such thing as both at the same time. And, anthropology research, again, has just sort of over and over and over and over and over again shown that where there are similarities amongst human beings, there are also at the same time differences amongst human beings. And when you get that in your head, if you get that, sort of in your being, that you're going to interact with other human beings and they're going to be different from you and also the same as you, that makes interacting with other human beings actually so much easier and so much more positive.
Yes, it's empowering I want to use the word positive again in such a positive way because it's less scary to go out in the world a little bit and more, oh, okay, we're all doing the best we can. Let's respect that and just go from there. It's so easy for us all to get caught in our own heads and forget that, I feel like.
It's 100%.
Well, I very much appreciated this conversation. Is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I think so. And, it's basically going back to the topic of my book. Here in the U.S., and well, let's just talk about the U.S. Here in the U.S., there is an understanding that, we live currently in very conflicted times, that this is, a time period where there's sort of unprecedented, differences and people don't listen to each other and people don't know how to get along and, so on and so forth. And I, just want to say that, again, through anthropology research, we know that there's not a single solitary time period in human history. There's not a single solitary culture in, the world where conflict has not been a part of the atmosphere. Conflict is normal. That's just how things are with human beings, not because we're naturally combative, because we're naturally many things, but just basically because, when you have, even just two human beings together, they're going to find some areas where they differ, where they disagree. It's just inevitable.
I think anyone with a sibling can understand that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a sibling, and yes, I would concur. But rather than looking at, sort of what's taking place in your culture, whatever conflict is taking place in your culture as being sort of abnormal or unusual in the world, to really sort of embrace that this is normal and natural if you're a human being living in a human culture, and that in the long sort of span of humanity, 100,000 plus years of humanity, humans have figured out ways to deal with their conflict. I'm not saying it's always necessarily the best, but there certainly, have been opportunities for human beings to work out on conflict in, again, using the word, in a very positive way. So rather than getting caught up in, there's just no way, there's no way forward. We live in such, divided times. I cannot speak with someone, they cannot speak with me. Just recognize that difference is going to be there, and just be able to recognize that you can still problem solve your way towards a better way of interacting with someone, even if you if you disagree with them, even if you don't even like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, again, I think it's very reassuring to have such context in what are incredibly divided times. And it just feels scary. And like, you're right. Sometimes it's overwhelming and you feel like, well, there's no solution, so I'm just going to turn away. And then to hear, well, no, this is part of being human. Turning away, not so helpful, but understanding that you have that power to problem solve and walk differently through your own path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, where can listeners connect with you and your work?
Well, my website's always a good place to go. It's tasteofanthropology.com, all one word, .com. I also, if I'm going to spend any time on social media, it's going to be either on LinkedIn or on YouTube, my two favorite places. And I also have a podcast as well. But if you go to tasteofanthropology.com, you will see all the links. You'll be able to find all the places where I am.
Perfect. And I'll, of course, include those all in the show notes. Thank you again. I very much appreciated this.
This has been lovely. Thank you so much, Kay Margaret.
Thank you for joining me on Intuitive Wisdom. If this episode brought you clarity or inspiration, please take a moment to leave a 5-star review. It truly helps others find this space. And if someone you love, you could use a shift in energy, share this episode with them. You never know what might resonate. For more, explore my frequency reset service, tune into more episodes, or begin the journey through my book, all at deliciousease.com. That's DELICIOUSEASE.com. All right, until next time, trust your energy, honor your space, and keep coming home to yourself.